Welcome to the EverLearner video interviews and podcast. Join James, Mike and myself for the next 45 minutes as we deeply analyse the data trends that have emerged from the 2018 GCSE results, focusing heavily on the GCSE PE 9-1. In the minutes that follow, we will present to you data that proves that GCSE PE cohorts are shrinking, with over 25,000 fewer students completing in 2018 than in 2017. We discuss why this might be happening and what the future might hold. We discuss the underperformance of students nationally on examined components of the GCSE PE courses, paying particular attention to the extended writing elements of the assessments. We will reveal to you as well the key to your student success in 2019. We reveal the true nature of the gender gap across all GCSEs and use this insight as a trigger for what might be causing male underperformance in GCSE PE. Finally, we offer you the opportunity to work with us at the EverLearner for the next 6 weeks to implement a full departmental project to improve the capacity of your learners to write extended answers and to increase success in GCSE PE exams.
I've improved by a whole grade.
I've improved.
By a whole grade.
By a whole grade.
By a whole grade.
My teacher isn't just Mr. Maddock. It's a whole teaching team made up of James, Mike and Marta.
My classroom's all about doing and applying. My days standing at the front of the classroom with a PowerPoint are long gone.
I master every concept by learning at my own pace.
I spend 100% of my class time interacting and supporting individual students.
I move on only when the moment is right for me, not the whole class.
I know what each and every student is mastering and struggling on at every moment.
I know exactly what I need to learn next, and I can go back and review material at any time.
I spend my teaching time supporting and inspiring, not planning, delivering and marking.
I can learn from anywhere at any time.
I can switch off when school closes, knowing they are learning from the best.
My teacher has my homework marked before I get to class.
I set every piece of homework at the start of the year.
I'm 2 weeks ahead of my expected progress.
I can track everyone's progress with a swipe of a finger.
I can track my own progress and set my own targets.
I now have time to focus on developing the skills of every learner in my classroom.
I know exactly what it means to explain, evaluate and analyse, and I'm not afraid of any exam.
My lessons are now far more about the skills and the application, not just the content itself.
I've completely remodeled what it means to be a teacher in my classroom.
Welcome to the Teacher in Classroom 21 podcast and video interview. Mike, this is your first experience doing this kind of thing. Welcome to...
It's quite exciting.
It is quite exciting. Although there's a lot of wires, and if anybody could see what was over that way...
Yeah, it's a mess.
It's quite something. Nevertheless, this conversation started really, Mike, because I asked you to do some analysis on GCSE results, specifically looking at physical education, GCSE 9-1, 1-9.
Yeah.
And you've gone a bit further than we sort of first anticipated, and I think we've come up with some really interesting potential conclusions. So the whole focus of this recording is going to be about sort of discussing that and trying deciphering and rendering down that information to something which is utilizable by people. So tell us where we start.
So we started looking just at the cohort numbers. So many of these numbers are either from JCQ or JQC, whatever it is.
JCQ. Yeah.
JCQ. And there's some which have been contributed by other people. So Jason Rhodes contributed some. Who else?
Tim Brown.
Tim Brown contributed some. So thanks to everybody.
Liam Grest as well.
Liam Grest. Yeah. Thanks to everybody who did contribute to it. So we started by just looking at the cohort numbers. So we're down as a sector, as a subject, we're down in terms of the number of students taking GCSEs. So from 2014 to 2015, we increased our numbers. 2015 to 16, we increased. Obviously, at that point, possibly coincidentally, possibly not, we had the introduction of the new exam, and 2017 was down, and 2018 is down again from 2017. So we're seeing a downward trend in terms of the numbers of both males and females taking the subject.
The thing I would look at with regard to those numbers, I mean, you can look at the 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017 trend as somewhat of a bell there, but the drop to 2018 is significant. So we have there's a significant change. There's a reduction between 2016 and 2017, for example. But between 2017 and 2018, we have a dramatic reduction.
Yeah, and we're currently, as of this year, we're the lowest we've been for the past 5 years.
Yeah.
So that's only GCSE. So it's possible that those students have moved on to a different sports qualification, possibly BTEC or something more vocational. That's possible. So maybe it's not as dire as we seem. It's possible they're just not on GCSE. But it's potentially worrying that the numbers of GCSE students are declining, and looking at this quite rapidly.
Yeah. Now I think it's going to be interesting 2019, 2020 where we see that number stabilise. My slight concern there is with any centres that are experiencing disappointment or frustration at results, whether it be practical, exam component or anything, or combined, that trend will deepen over a period of time over the next 2 cycles. We'll have to wait and see about that. Yeah. But we can certainly say with certainty that there is a trend downwards in entries in GCSE physical education across UK schools.
Yeah, we're definitely down. I mean, it seems unlikely to be a coincidence that it happened as the new exams were introduced. Obviously, we had a lower weighting of practical, so potentially there's people suggesting that students can't take the subject.
Do you read anything?
That can't be managed as easily via practical.
Do you read anything into the slightly steeper decline in the male cohort to the decline in the female cohort?
The female decline is sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there is a steeper decline for males than females. That's all we can really tell. We can speculate why, but we don't know for sure. It could be, like I said, it could be people persuading students not to take the exam. Let's say, given that there's a higher requirement for the written element now, could it be that people are looking at students writing and saying that they're not going to perform so well in this exam, so they should be steered away from it?
And would that steering affect boys more than girls? We don't know.
We don't know. Based on other things that we're going to present, it's likely.
It's possible, yeah. Okay, so certainly first conclusion, if we look at the whole market, as Ofqual would refer to it as, interesting, we're looking at a decline in cohort numbers on that GCSE.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I'd still say relatively healthy number, 95,000.
Yeah, when you compare to other subjects, other subjects which would be chosen as an option. We can't compare to maths or English, for example. It's a different ball game. But yeah, we're generally healthy, but we're going down. So it's, yes, it could be. Say, as you said earlier, say the trend does continue for the next 2 years, then we're going to be looking at being down into 70,000 in 2020. It could be worrying at some point.
Okay, understood. Okay, what's next?
So next we have the raw marks by exam board. So essentially grade boundaries for the exam. So the things that come out of it is OCR tends to have, across all of the papers and the practical, the NEA element is in here too, the OCR tend to have the highest pass rate. So the mark to get a 4, so OCR on paper 1 you're looking at 51%, just over. Paper 2 you're looking at 48%, and in the practical you're looking at 53%. And that's higher than AQA and EdXL. But interestingly, the move between grade boundaries from 4 to 5, 5 to 6, and so on is less in OCR.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure why that is. I'm not sure. It must be something to do with, I assume, the distribution of marks which have been given, leading to the grade boundaries being more narrow on that exam.
And the first thing if I look at that OCR combined sort of unit there, paper 1, paper 2, and practical or NEA, the first thing I notice is there's relative parity between the non-examined assessment, the practical, which a pass rate is effectively 54% of the raw marks, and paper 1, where the pass rate is effectively 52% of the raw marks, and a little bit lower on paper 2, where the pass rate is 48 and a bit % raw marks. There seems to be a relative consistency to that.
Yeah.
The practical is being slightly better achieved than the exams, but overall the picture is relatively consistent. Do we get that elsewhere?
Yeah, it's the same for AQA and Edexcel. So for a 4, you're roughly looking about 50% of as the pass rate. So 51.5 for OCR, 47 for AQA, and 49, I think that is.
Pretty much bang on 50
at Edexcel. So you're looking at 50% to get a 4. So I'm really interested in raw marks.
Yeah.
Because for me that's directly related to what the students actually wrote. And that's the thing that we as teachers and as students can actually control.
So if we take out sort of scaling and so on, and UMS scaling for a second, I mean, what's the actual picture here? What do you see? I noticed 2 big red blocks in your
so
your analysis
the red blocks there are the ones which sort of jump out. So on AQA, I should have put this in a different color. It's 28, I think it says 28% on paper 1. 28 marks. So 35% to get a pass, a 4 on paper 1 in AQA.
So I have to pause there a second. So I just want to clarify this situation. So we are arguing that on a GCSE more rigorous gold standard exam, on one of our PE papers, AQA paper 1, to pass the exam,
to pass that
paper, it is acceptable to get almost 2/3 of the marks wrong.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, 35% to get a 4 on paper 1. I mean, it's paper 2 is 43%, so it's higher, but it's still 34 out of 78 marks. So it's you don't need a lot of marks to get that 50%. But again, for me, that where that number has been placed is related to how well all students taking the exam did.
Yeah.
So we're always going to have that. The grade boundaries are always going to move to give an roughly even spread or bell curve between 9 and U. So that's not the interesting part for me. The interesting part is the next bit, which is how many marks you need to move up the grade boundaries. Just to backtrack slightly, Edexcel is similar. So 44% on paper 1 to get a 4, 45% on paper 2, 58 on 3, and 45.
So certainly in AQA and Edexcel, we see something closer to the traditional model, GCSE physical education, where the practical component or the non-examined assessment component overperformed in relation to the examined units.
Yeah.
Here we've got a situation where OCR, there's relative consistency, even though the strongest performing unit was the NEA. But with AQA and Edexcel, we have something closer to the traditional model where the practical outperforms significantly the success the students achieve compared to their writing.
Yeah. But again, where it becomes interesting for me, and this is the reason it's interesting, is because it's the thing that we can directly impact on. Is where in these papers can we squeeze a number of more marks out to move students up a grade boundary? And you don't need, according to this, you don't need many more marks per paper to move up a grade boundary. So the part next to it, as an average, you need 3.5 marks on OCR paper 1 to move up a grade boundary.
Yeah. For that component.
For that component. So on paper 2, it's 3 marks. On the practical, it's 5 marks.
Yeah.
So in a moment, we're going to look at the extended writing elements. And those marks are readily available. Many students aren't getting those marks in the extended writing alone. So if we could somehow squeeze 3 more marks, 4 more, depending on the exam board, 3 or 4 or 5 more marks out of each paper, then students will move a grade boundary.
And I think that is a really interesting headline, isn't it?
Yeah. So as a total for OCR, if you're an OCR student, as an average, and it depends where you sit on that scale at your current point, but as an average, 11.4 marks would move you up a boundary across your whole exam. For AQA, it's 14.4, and for Edexcel, it's 15.8. So across all of those components, whether it's 3 or 4 components, depending on your exam board, between 11 and 15 marks would see a jump to the next boundary. That to me seems achievable.
I agree, and I think that's where the joy in these numbers are. There's some concerning trends in there, but perhaps the most facilitating trend is that small differences can make a really big impact.
Yeah, really can.
So something like a well-implemented, well-considered, thought-through project which specifically targets one area of performance could, for example, extended writing or some other feature, could significantly impact students' opportunity to progress grade. And you're saying obviously there's 11 point something points between 2 grades. That's in the worst case. It could
a student could already have half of those.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it could well be that it's 11 maximum that they have to achieve to get up to the next grade. It could well be significantly less than that. So I think that's really kind of the joy of these numbers. Not that the exam boards have got it brilliantly right or terribly wrong, that small differences and well implemented changes can have a dramatic impact on student output.
Yeah. The percentages of students achieving each grade, like I said earlier, to me is irrelevant. As an individual teacher of a class of 30 students, that national picture doesn't actually affect anything that I should be doing.
No, and of course, what we've seen in the headlines, and certainly if you read any of the publications on Ofqual, they are pretty much celebrating the fact that GCSE results are stable, high grades are stable, pass grades are stable, and so on and so on and so on. Now, I agree with you; they're always going to be stable because it's a managed outcome.
Yeah,
this is not necessarily a representation of what students are writing or doing for their assessments. If you look at raw mark performance, I mean, again, we can have a look at that AQA paper 1 as an example, and I know there's much starker examples in other subjects as well. We have a number of students who are getting a pass on that component who are missing 2/3 of the correct answers or more.
Or more, yeah. When you look at the raw mark, well, let's do that now. So if we go on to the next page, we have we're missing the data here for OCR. So we have Edexcel and AQA. So this is showing us the national average for those extended writing questions. So on Edexcel, paper 1, you've got question 12 and 13. They're both worth 9 marks. And the national average is 2.1 and 2.8 out of 9, respectively. So that means then you have almost 7 for question 12 and 6 for question 13 marks remaining. So the student is getting 2 or 3, let's say, out of 9. If we go back to the section we looked at earlier, where you only need 3, 4, or 5 marks per paper, the student could easily achieve that on just one question in that paper.
Yeah.
So and if we focus on these extended writing questions, in order to do that, we just need to improve. I say we just, as if it's easy. We need to improve the student's ability to communicate in written form. If we could do that, then they would be into the realm of getting 3, 4, 5, or 6 out of 9 even. We're not asking them to get 9 out of 9, but if they could just get 3 more marks on that one question, then potentially across their whole course, that's enough to boost them up to the next grade boundary.
It's really interesting. And again, for me, I try and resist the temptation to look at those average scores across those questions and not to kind of feel depressed a little bit, really, because they're really low.
Well, yeah, 2.1 out of 9, 2.8 out of 9. So for paper 2 for Edexcel, you're looking at 3.2 out of 9, and question 14 on paper 2, looking at 3.2 out of 9.
Again, we're looking at basically 2/3 of the marks missed on that extended writing.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting from the perspective of that something is not working there, and it's very easy to put the label of our students or PE students are not very good at extended writing. Extended writing is a more complex thing than just writing a lot. It's subject knowledge, it's application, it's the capacity to evaluate, to analyze, to discuss, it's the capacity to make informed opinions and conclusions. Those things all contribute to that. So one of the things I would reflect on from the position of the classroom teacher is, to what extent are my students actually developing the skill of writing? How is that skill actually being developed? And again, I repeat the same thing. The beauty in this is that those those 6-7 marks per question, it's not like they're not, that they are available. And if we do something different and support students to upskill in that environment, then changes can be quite dramatic, as you were saying before.
Yeah, and I think if you were to sit with the student and coax out of them the knowledge, they would have those 6, 7, 8, or 9 marks worth of knowledge.
I agree.
In my experience, it's the fact that they can't write that down, or they aren't writing that down. Not they can't, but they aren't writing that down well enough in the exam to pick up the marks. But they probably know it.
Yeah, or they're making very simplistic connections.
Yeah, so content-wise, I don't, again, this is generalization, but I don't think that's the problem. The problem is that those students aren't writing that down at the right point in their exam.
Yeah.
So there's work to be done. And you said earlier about could this be, could people say, oh, well, my students can't. This isn't about a teacher saying their students. This is all students.
Yeah.
Well, not all.
This is
the average. This is the national picture. So nationally, they're getting 2/3 or 1/3 of the marks for those questions.
There's a very practical opportunity here as well. Teachers can have a look at those students who did perform well. I mean, EAQA, for example, or the enhanced exam analysis via the exam boards. Teachers can have a look at those and look at students who didn't succeed, and get those papers to have a look. Now, of course, you're only ever looking at individuals or small cohorts of information in that environment, but it would be useful to see the types of behaviours and skill that are being credited there. I'm really interested now as well to see what the exam boards release as guidance and exemplars for the answers that weren't achieved by the majority of people. Let's see what's put out there. But again, I come back to a conclusion, which is, again, if I'm a head of department, or I'm looking at my development plan, or I'm looking at my data and analysing it right now in preparation for the development plan, I don't just want to put in there, we're going to improve extended writing. But for me, it's the skill of writing from an early stage in that course cycle or even school cycle that could be the key to unlocking these marks. This is not something where we learn as we've always learned and then we practice some extended writing at the end. There needs to be something embedded here which is developmental of the skill of writing in a fluent, considered, applied, evaluative methodology. And I think that will scare people to a degree because it's perhaps not what we're all used to, but I think it's an essential realization we need to make. The other thing for me as well, let's take, and I was looking at the AQA, I was looking at the AQA examiner's report as well, which has just been released, and they clearly state things like evaluation and application were weak by students in these questions. So if students don't understand or aren't fulfilling the behavior of evaluation, we can look at that as a writing weakness, which it is, but we also have to look at it as a behavioral weakness. So when these students are actually learning concept A, B, C, D, are they learning that through the frame of evaluation, through the skill of being evaluative in the behaviors of learning that thing? Or is it simply they learn it and then they have to write it in an evaluative way? And I think the latter, regrettably, is more common and needs addressing.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, definitely. There's a clear picture coming out of this that those students who are better writers perform better in these exams. So the knock-on effect of that then is, one way at least of improving results is to encourage students to be better writers. If we could do that without teaching them any more content, without them knowing any more content, they would do better in these exams. I
want to pick you up on that, Mike. So you're saying from your analysis, your macro belief would be that even if they don't learn more or better content, if they develop the skill of writing, that will improve performance.
Yeah, I think so. Because if they write better, more of the content that they do know will come out. I think a student taking one of these exams isn't getting all of their content out of the head onto the page. So there's a deficit of they have content left, if you like, that could come out. If they could write better and get more of that content out onto the page, they would score more marks without having to learn more. They've already got it. They don't have to learn more. They just have to write more of it. And they have to write it down, what's in their head. And I think that's probably where the students are not picking up these marks, not because they don't know it, because they're not writing it.
I mean, and of course, in individual cases, it could be both or more of one than another, of course. But the macro picture seems to be the case. And again, it brings me back to the project-based implementation of how you make changes in something like this. This is not something which you can click your fingers and improve. This needs to be something which needs to be data-centric in its analysis. It needs to be tested in its methodology, and it needs to be implemented across a team of people.
Yeah, and people should take this as the national picture and then look at their own results.
Of course,
with that in mind, because your own results may be the complete opposite, or they may be similar, or they may be 50% similar, 50% different, whatever. But so in that setting, you have to look at your own results and decide on what you do to improve in your own setting. But nationally, there's an average, obviously, and this is what it is.
So I'm finding it really interesting. I'm finding that on some examined components in that GCSE PE, we have low thresholds of raw marks to achieve a pass, and above, and we have a specific underperformance in the skill of prose-based writing by a range of students taking those qualifications, which significantly decreases the national averages.
Yeah, certainly on those extended writing questions, students are underperforming nationally. We don't have here the numbers for the other questions. Maybe they're underperforming there as well. Maybe what I said earlier about the content isn't right. Maybe there's lots of missing content too. I'm sure that's the case in part. But students are getting marks from somewhere, and it's not extended writing. So they're getting those on the other questions. But again, teachers need to look at that in their own setting and decide on what their project would be.
I think you're right, and I think this is a stimulus for people to be analysing their own data and to be preparing those development plans. I mean, we are looking at the national picture, and of course, everyone needs to look at their individual condition. Where do we go next, Mike?
Okay, so now we have this is cumulative percentages. This is for not all subjects, but most subjects. Cumulative percentages of students across grade boundaries. So if we were to look at this, then we could say that in art, I'll take that because it's A, and this is by gender. So boys, males, 2.2% of males got a 9 in art. 5.7% of females got a 9 in art. If we go along a little bit further, then 6% of males got an 8 or above. So it's cumulative. 12% got a 7 or above, 24.5% got a 6 and above, and so on. I think we'll make this document, I guess, available so people can look at the details of that. But what comes out of it is that across almost all subjects, girls are outperforming boys. And in some subjects, they're significantly outperforming boys.
Art being a good example.
Art is an example. Interesting though, art is an anomaly based on what we hypothesize is the reason for that. So art being an example, girls are outperforming boys across all of those grade boundaries. Girls are outperforming boys by 15 percentage points.
Wow.
So 3.5 percentage points higher at a grade 9 for girls.
So just to clarify that, so we're going to have a lot of PE teachers tuning into this, but I just want to clarify that because it's going to help us in a moment. So if you are the average boy to the average girl, or some notion of that, the average girl, on average, is likely to score 15 percentage points above the boy.
Yeah. Girls, on average, girls are scoring almost 16 percentage points higher than boys.
I hope there's some art teachers thinking about that.
So if we go down in biology, we're down to 2.8%.
So that's the average gender gap.
Yeah.
But still advantageous to girls.
But girls are still outperforming the boys. In chemistry, girls are outperforming boys by 1.4%. In computing, this may shock people, girls are outperforming boys by almost 4%, or 4 percentage points. Drama, girls outperforming boys by 13, almost 14%. In English, it's 10%. English literature, almost 12%. French, 7%, just over. Geography 5%, German 6%, History 6%. These are all girls outperforming boys. When we get to maths, the boys outperform the girls only by just over 1%. Music, girls outperform boys by 4 and a bit percent. Performing arts is girls ahead by 7%. PE, girls are ahead by 9%.
Right, so we're approaching 10 percentage points average difference between girls and boys in GCSE physical education across all exam boards.
Girls are outperforming boys by 10 percentage points, almost. Physics is the only other one where it goes the other way. Boys outperforming girls by just over 2%. But we have to look at that swing. You know, when the boys do outperform the girls, it's
only just.
In many of the others, when the girls are outperforming the boys, it's 10 to 15%.
And it's in quite specific locations too.
Where you're looking at maths and physics.
Yeah.
Religious studies, 13.8%, or 13.9% almost in favour of the girls. Science, a double award, 2.8% in favour of the girls, and Spanish, 8.5% in favour of the girls. So the picture is that girls are dramatically outperforming the boys in almost all areas except maths and physics, where the boys just outperform the girls.
Now, Ofqual claim, and anyone can go and read this on the Ofqual website, they claim that the 1 to 9 GCSEs have narrowed the gender gap.
It's possible. I don't know what it was before, but it's not particularly narrow at the moment.
Yeah. So it's that old cliche of slightly better than rubbish is still rubbish.
Yeah. I think what it shows is, well, let's look at the next bit. So I looked at all of the specifications for these subjects. I only looked, for clarity, I only looked at AQA specifications, but generally they're going to be similar. And I wrote down in this column whether I felt it had a heavy writing requirement.
Yeah.
So that generally was if there was an essay component to it, or whether the whole subject is linguistic by nature. So I included languages in that group as well. So, for example, art doesn't have a high writing component; it's all practical. So that comes under no, it doesn't have a high writing component. Drama, for example, did have a high writing component because there's a big essay in it. And when you look at that in relation to the size of the gender gap, it's quite interesting. Art is an anomaly, and there may be other reasons why girls would be outperforming boys. But across all of the other areas, PE is also an anomaly, but across all of the other subjects, aside from art and PE, when there's a heavy writing component, you get a larger gender gap in favour of the girls. So what it's suggesting is that by the nature of the exam alone, when we're asking students to do lots of writing, the girls do better. Say art's an anomaly because there's not a heavy writing component, yet the girls are still outperforming the boys, and PE the same. There's not a heavy writing component, but the girls are still outperforming the boys. I can think of why that may be in art, girls being potentially more expressive, more emotive. In PE, I can't really think of a reason why girls would be outperforming the boys. It doesn't seem as clear to me why that would be the case. But in all other areas, I wrote the headline down here: where there is deemed to be a heavy written element in a subject, girls are outperforming boys by average of 6.7 percentage points. And again, for clarity, that's when you're looking at results from a 4 and above. I didn't include 3 downwards, just a pass rate. But on that passing rate, girls are outperforming boys 6.7% higher when there's a written element, a significant written element.
So in anything that's considered a pass, in a subject which has a significant written element, our analysis suggests that girls will outperform boys on an average of 7 percentage points.
Just under, yeah.
Just under 7 percentage points. So let's think about that in relation to PE then, because if we're suggesting that PE is not a heavily focused written subject, something else is going on there, because we have a dramatic difference between the percentage points achieved by girls and by boys, girls being far outperforming. So what I find interesting about that is potentially, if we were to have the numbers and we were to look at something like the practical performance side of the non-examined assessment, I wonder to what degree that gender gap would exist. And having identified already that we believe that the key to success in GCSE PE, and certainly the examine components right now, which of course is 60%, we believe is the skill and the capacity of the students to write coherently with skill, fluency, application, and so on. Even though we don't judge the subject to be a writing-based subject or a heavy writing-based subject, some people would disagree with that, I think, but let's keep those parameters. It would seem to me that a lot of the overperformance, a lot of the underperformance by boys relates to that capacity to write in a fluent and consistent way, as you were saying earlier, to express that knowledge within exam conditions. And you were saying something interesting to me off camera before we came on. I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll ask you to sort of correct me if I get this wrong. But you were saying to me that the way that our assessments work in the world today is writing. There are a couple of exceptions, Spanish orals, even coursework is writing almost always, but something artistic or a piece of music, for example, a composition could be another way to be assessed. But broadly speaking, today, the way that 16-year-olds are assessed in their GCSE examinations is through the conduit skill of writing that knowledge, understanding, and application down on a piece of paper. Generally, yeah. And what we are arguing here is that, generally speaking, that skill is significantly more developed in girls than it is in boys at the age of 16 in our educational cycle. Yeah. So for whatever reason, maybe they're socialized that way, maybe it comes from early years, a much earlier age, the girls are better writers than boys. And because most of our exams are written, then it's no wonder the girls are outperforming the boys in the exams. I would imagine if the exams were not written, but they were taken in some different form, then these numbers would change. Not based on any change in the level of knowledge of students, but based on the skill in which we ask students to perform that knowledge. So therefore, what remains controllable by the school, by the classroom teacher? What do they do in that context? If someone is looking at their results and it mirrors this broad picture, I'm sure there'll be, in relatively small cohorts, there may be quite big differences. But let's say that the picture is approximately this one. What do teachers consider doing to actually change this scenario? Well, I think there's two ways students can improve their raw marks. One is to know more content. Yeah. And two is to make sure they get that content into the exam paper so it can be marked and they can be awarded marks. So assuming that students have the content, they have the knowledge, they need to write it better. Mm-hmm. Are we talking about something as practical as having your lesson objective being developing the skill of writing? I think it probably goes deeper and more to a whole school level, and probably wider as well, that as long as the exam is written, then we need to focus some of our attention, not all, but we need to focus some of our attention on encouraging students to become better writers. However that happens in a school, and no doubt some people will be doing it through sort of a targeted intervention for specific students that they've identified, and some will have more whole school approaches to writing. However that's done, I think if we could improve the way students write, and not necessarily just in an exam, but if somebody was just a better writer in general, they would answer exam questions better, I have no doubt. So better writers will perform better in exam. We see it already. This is not just speculation. The girls are better writers and they're doing better in exams. That's what this is showing. So we can extrapolate that. If we made a boy a better writer, they don't need any more content, they just write better, they would perform better in an exam. So I want to bring this back to P for a second. Again, correct me when I start getting this wrong, because you're the person who's been deep in these numbers, as you described to me earlier. It's a similar phrase. Yeah. So in PE, we have more boys than girls in the cohort, I think approximately 2 to 1. There or thereabouts. I mean, we've got the numbers here, right? I mean, not for PE. How many boys to girls? I mean, in terms of total numbers taking. I mean, of boys, we've got, yeah, it's not far off 2 to 1, is it? We've got 62,000 boys, 34,000 girls. Okay, so you've got significantly more boys. The national picture is that the girls are significantly outperforming the boys.
You're talking about PE or
in PE?
In PE, yeah.
On those assessments. We're looking that nationally, girls clearly display that they are better writers than boys. Of course, there's loads of exceptions. And within the PE subject, we have extended writing being a significant and obvious weakness in the capacity of students to pick up marks where those marks, those small numbers of marks, could make a massive difference to the individual and the grade changes that they could achieve.
Yeah, a student, take your average student who's getting roughly a third of the marks on those extended writing questions. If they dramatically improved only their extended writing capacity and they were getting 5, 6, 7, 8 marks, that would be enough across all of their papers to push that student up to the next boundary.
At least.
Yeah.
So here's the conclusion, Mike, and I think you disagree with this deliberately provocative conclusion. But I'm a teacher. I'm a classroom teacher. I'm a head of department. I'm a PE teacher. Whatever I do, GCSE PE. Maybe I'm even thinking about this for A-level PE or whatever, examine units and BTEC, CTEC, Cambridge Nationals, and so on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to improve boys' writing performance.
Yeah, it's kind of the natural conclusion because boys are underperforming.
It feels like you go there, yeah.
Yeah,
So, but you don't agree, do you?
Well, no, because the girls also could improve. It's not the girls aren't picking up all their raw marks.
Yeah,
all the marks available. So, just remove the gender element. The gender element paints the picture, but remove that. What you get is better writers perform better in the exam. So, if we could make all people, all girls, all boys, better writers, then all of them would perform better in the exam. And the girls we could push from, say, 3 or 4 marks per extended writing question to 5 or 6, and the boys could go from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, and everybody would benefit from it. So I don't think it's a matter of targeting the boys in particular, but it's having the awareness that the writing, the extended writing, at least for PE, the extended writing is a big weakness, and if we could improve that, only that element, it would potentially have the knock-on effect of pushing up a grade boundary for all students.
That's really interesting. I agree with you. I think it is a natural hole to fall down or a natural clue to grab hold of, that we should improve boys' writing. But I think the project here is to improve writing. And specifically, and you said everyone benefits, so I want to pick up on that. The thing is, if we've got colleagues out there who work in the PE sector, heads of PE, teams of PE teachers, who have the capacity to improve the writers in their subject, they have a potential capacity to improve the writers across the entire school. And there's no more facilitating, faster route to whatever people's career ambitions are than to improve the writing capacity of young people, as we've seen from this data. That's why, for me, I would be urging teachers out there to consider so well thought out, data-centric or well-researched, tested, implemented projects to go about improving the writing of students, perhaps initially in PE if it's the people we're talking to right now, and potentially beyond. For me, that's where the conclusion falls. And that's not to neglect the fact that, you could always get a couple more marks on the practical, or maybe our moderation didn't go so well, and whatever. Of course, and we're not talking about doing this over that stuff.
No, of course not.
But there's clear evidence here that those changes and a well thought out implemented project would significantly improve the chances of young people within a cohort to actually improve their performance on these assessments.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
Marta, you've been very quiet over there. Anything you want to chuck in as you've been listening over there?
Not really, no. I've just been listening, trying to be on the controls, making sure that everything works, and it just sounds very, very interesting. I find it surprising because coming from the sort of languages background, I think it's been, for a long time, I think we've been aware of this, the situation that girls tend to overperform in comparison to boys, but in a subject like PE, that's probably not something I would have expected. And it's really interesting to see that actually it's happening throughout, and it's only exceptional cases where it's actually the boys who overperform. So yes, there is obviously something that needs to change, something that teachers and us all as educators probably need to
parents
do,
and broader social processes as well. I mean, I think Mike was saying earlier about the process of socialization.
Yes, exactly.
I think we have to face reality that I think it's fair to say that on the whole, girls are encouraged to read and write a little more than perhaps boys are in typical family structures. We, with tons of exceptions, of course.
I mean, my other point was going to be as well that maybe aside from what everyone should be doing, there is maybe also, there's also a point to be made that maybe the way students and children are assessed needs to also be revised so that this performance in writing doesn't permeate their performance in every, in almost all subjects. I think it's important to let children show and maybe express themselves in other ways other than the written form, albeit we know being a good writer is a really important skill to have in the future. We will all agree with that. Other skills are also important to be developed. So, yeah.
Okay, interesting. As we finish off here, I want to read a couple of things here. This is from an article on Ofqual or gov.uk specifically, and it was written by Nick Gibb, who is the Minister for School Standards, and he wrote this on 14th of May 2018. It was published on Ofqual. Go and have a look at it. We'll put the link in the description as well. And it's called New Gold Standard GCSEs Prepare Pupils for Careers Britain Needs. Okay, so given what we've just described, Nick Gibb is quoting the following things as students began to sit their GCSEs in 2018. Amongst many other things, he said the following. He said, "These more rigorous gold standard GCSEs are helping to nurture the next generation of scientists, linguists, and historians. Whatever pupils want to do with their lives, these qualifications will prepare them for future success and help deliver the skills Britain needs to be fit for the future." So I think we've got to reflect on a statement like that and whether that is a reliable thing as of now. He went on to say, "Thanks to our reforms and the hard work of teachers, education standards are rising in our schools. And last year, teachers and pupils responded well to the new English and maths exams. I wish pupils all the very best as they prepare to sit these exams, and I look forward to celebrating their success in the summer." And I can't help but read something like that and then reflect on the raw mark performances that in reality, okay, we can say there's a consistent level of pass rate, high grades, where we've got effectively this bell curve managed, scaled output. And you can say it's stable. As I said before, it's always going to be stable. I can't help but look at some of the raw mark scores and some of those components. I mean, there's some really, really stark ones, and wonder to what degree these more rigorous gold standard GCSEs are truly helping to nurture the next generation of scientists, linguists, and historians. And come back to your point earlier, Marta, about perhaps we need to look at different skills. It appears to me that we are effectively rendering down skills to writing and relatively little else in the system as it faces at the moment. And with the numbers we've just seen, that is going to only have one outcome.
Yeah. I mean, if you take PE as an example, it's more rigorous because there's less practical and more writing. That's the only reason it's more rigorous. That's the only change, really.
Yeah.
The question, I don't know. The question's harder. It's subjective, so
they're kind of harder to interpret. I don't know if individual questions. I mean, I think a lot of teachers spend a lot of time figuring out how you get AO1, AO2, and AO3 skills into an answer.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on.
So I guess it's more rigorous in that. I mean,
maybe it is more rigorous. Maybe it's kind of a political statement. Basically, doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But maybe they're more rigorous. Maybe they're harder. It's fine. But ultimately, it's irrelevant. We just need to help students to write better. Like I said earlier, they need to know more, and hopefully need to write better. And if there was exams which had different skills, then obviously that writing better would change into speaking better or performing better or whatever they're being assessed on. But yeah, certainly as the exams stand at the moment, in PE for sure, but it seems like it's consistent across others. We have a gap in students aren't writing their writing isn't of high enough quality. So whether the exams are more rigorous or not is irrelevant. We just have to look at, say, the national picture, and teachers look at their own individual results and see where the gap is, see what the problem is, and then do something to fix that problem.
Yeah.
And that problem identification should be based on the data from the results.
Yeah, real world.
When we looked at naturally we kind of would expect boys to outperform girls in computing, but they definitely don't. So you know the assumptions that we make are not accurate. We need to look at the actual numbers and then identify the problem from that. Yeah. And based on this, it's extended writing nationally. So I don't know, maybe they're more rigorous. Maybe they're preparing students. The preparing students for jobs of the 21st century seems like they changed IT for computing. I don't see that there's a huge amount been done. Maybe there is behind the scenes, but on the surface, there's not a massive amount that's been done to change it for 21st century jobs. I mean, what difference is it if they're from the exams 2 years ago to the exams now?
Maybe a bit more evaluation.
Yeah, maybe.
But
the students aren't performing in those areas. You know,
Yeah.
they're not performing better in evaluation, analysis,
No.
discussion. So I think what's important for teachers to take out of it is what can they actually do to improve, and for students, what can they do to improve, and that's writing.
Improve writing.
And I think what if you speak to English teachers or people who study this, then how to improve writing, then you need to have students reading more.
Yeah.
And ideally from an early age. Obviously, if we're talking about GCSE students, we've missed that boat. But certainly more reading and more writing would help in those areas. Yeah. It's not easy, though. We make it seem easy. The numbers suggest an easy... there's an answer based on this. How people figure out how to answer that problem is difficult.
Well, I think that
it points people in the right direction.
Yeah, and talking about pointing people in the right direction, one of the opportunities that colleagues in PE have out there, if they're looking to improve performance on GCSE PE, it can be other courses as well, is we are offering 50 schools the opportunity to work with us to implement a 6-week online course to implement a project based on improving GCSE PE exam success and writing. It's based on the school's analysis, requirements, challenges, cohort, the data, the need, the specific action points are going to come from the specific context of the school. But the structure of how to implement the project and getting the project off the ground, we are going to provide an infrastructure for that to be enabled. And I really urge colleagues to consider that, because if the picture we have just discussed is even close to being the picture at your school, you actually, there's an imperative to actually act here. And I would argue many schools within that broad picture are going to need to address some issues of the skill of writing and the behavior of writing and the behavior of evaluation and so on and so on. And we're here to support you with that. So that would be my kind of concluding thought. We'll sign off here. Mike, thanks very much for doing the analysis.
Pleasure.
It's really fascinating. I mean, I've really found it useful and enlightening. I also really like the simplicity of the output. Improve writing, improve knowledge. That's basically the heart of success on these courses.
Yeah, I don't think it's rocket science.
No.
It's hard to do that, but at least we know what to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And there's a positive as well. Girls are doing really well.
They are doing girls, and we've got daughters. That helps.
Yeah, it's great.
But no, of course. I mean, nobody's knocking girls for doing better. That's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with having good, well-performing students.
That's great.
But it's where that disparity occurs at something so arbitrary as gender.
Yeah, well, I think that's more sociological.
Yeah.
So we almost remove it from but the fact still remains. Just remove the gender, and if you improve writing, improve results.
Absolutely.
So yeah, the gender difference is interesting, but it's probably not related to anything really that's happening in the school or minor. impact from the school on that. So yeah, just if we write better, then they'll do better.
Thanks, guys. Really great.
Thanks a lot.
I've improved by a whole grade.
I've improved.
Improved
By a whole grade.
By a whole grade.
By a whole grade.
My teacher isn't just Mr. Maddock. It's a whole teaching team made up of James, Mike and Marta.
My classroom's all about doing and applying. My days standing at the front of the classroom with a PowerPoint are long gone.
I master every concept by learning at my own pace.
I spend 100% of my class time interacting and supporting individual students.
I move on only when the moment is right for me, not the whole class.
I know what each and every student is mastering and struggling on at every moment.
I know exactly what I need to learn next, and I can go back and review material at any time.
I spend my teaching time supporting and inspiring, not planning, delivering and marking.
I can learn from anywhere at any time.
I can switch off when school closes, knowing they are learning from the best.
My teacher has my homework marked before I get to class.
I set every piece of homework at the start of the year.
I'm 2 weeks ahead of my expected progress.
I can track everyone's progress with a swipe of a finger.
I can track my own progress and set my own targets.
I now have time to focus on developing the skills of every learner in my classroom.
I know exactly what it means to explain, evaluate and analyse, and I'm not afraid of any exam.
My lessons are now far more about the skills and the application, not just the content itself.
I've completely remodeled what it means to be a teacher in my classroom.